Welcome to the Journey to Wellness podcast, sponsored by the Essential Wellness Society and Healing Wheel Holistic. I'm Alicia, Stonehill Caiyem, and I will be your host. With over 40 years experience in the health and fitness industry, I am ready to dive in to some of the most conflicting topics we have regards to health today. Let's go. Every day is a special day on the Journey to Wellness podcast. I have the privilege of sitting with some of the most amazing people, and I just love it. It's like every time I get to meet new friends and expand my community. And today I am with Erin, Alicia, and Ryant Parker. And without further ado, I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you so that you can get a better idea of who they are. And I'm going to start with you, Ryant.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryant Parker. I am a Shaman, Reiki Master, Breathwork teacher, 4 times published model, and inspiring actor. I've been doing this since the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, and the journey has been just an experience for me. I like to dive deep into ancestral healing. That's one of the key things that I feel that just everyone needs in order to heal. There's multiple steps of healing, but ancestral healing is where the roots need to be dug up in.
And I'm Erin Alicia. I am a psychic Karuna Reiki Master teacher, and I started really as a dental hygienist, and touching people every single day did a lot to my spiritual energy, and thus brought me to Reiki. And this is where I've really learned my intuitive abilities, my sensitive empathic abilities that brought me to this world of helping others see this within themselves. And the main thing of protection, energy protection, is a huge thing within my client work and my certification with Reiki students as well. And so that's the realm I mainly work in and my passion.
So something that I really like is that ever since we had the COVID era, the word healing actually became more of the forefront. Basically, we've been a tertiary model of illness where in America, you get ill or don't feel well, and then you treat the symptom rather than be on the prevention side, which would be to incorporate a lifestyle that may help you offset these illnesses. As a practicing nutritionist, this has been something that I've been trying to implement for 4 decades. But what I see emerging now is energy medicine. Mm-hmm. And it's new to some people, but it's very, very ancient. And energy medicine, I would like us to kind of explain a little bit about energetic shifts. And so when you talk about ancestral healing, can you expound on that a little bit more?
Yes. So there's this thing called ancestral inherited trauma. And we all have heard this quote, history repeats itself. And so this is why it's important for people to know their history, know their ancestral line. So for example, someone with extreme anger issues, they were born with it. They don't know where it comes from. But deep down, their great-great-grandfather, great-great-grandmother suffered with that same thing. And that trauma and that energy has just passed down from generation to generation and finally hit the previous person that is now suffering the same thing. So when it comes to healing, you need to pinpoint where that comes from. So if you know where that energy has come from, now you could be like, okay, what was the reasons why my great-great-grandmother or my great-great-grandfather was suffering through anger? Why is it with me? How can I channel and wave through that energy of trying to heal from that, So
it's so interesting because when I started studying a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, part of that was that for me, I can work in the now to fix, I'm going to use the word fix, past generations and future generations. And where I see this as really presenting itself is in the world of finance. So let's say you are born into an impoverished family. And I'm talking cash poor. I'm not talking about love poor. I'm talking about cash poor. And it is what it is, right? You're born into this family, and then some generations have this mentality of like, this is your station in life. This is who you are. You know, that big house there is not for you. These types of dialogues that go on, right? Oh, no, we don't go to college, or we don't go to higher education. It's okay that you're barely getting by. This is a thing. And it happens in really every city and every town across America. And then you see a shift where in that scenario, a child rises up and says, no.
All it takes is one.
This is not my future. This is not what's going to be. And then that energy shifts, and then they become very financially comfortable and raise their kids to be financially comfortable. And there's a shift there in the energy. I think of the story of Steve Jobs a lot too, you know, when I think about that. And I've seen it in my own life where we struggled when the kids were young, and just financially, that's where the struggle, it wasn't, you know, there was no other struggle but the finances. And then all 4 of my kids are doing amazing, like better than I ever did at their age. And then I was thinking about that teaching of how we can focus on that shift. Like I chanted for that, you know, to change this situation. And
it's passing down a different frequency than you were given. And usually it's from the black sheep, right? It's the one that shifts all the paradigms, all the projections, all the conditioning, not only from your family and society, but something that you know your body doesn't resonate with. And you shift it completely to be able to say, I came here for a purpose, and this is what resonates with me in my body, and is changing the frequency and passing down a frequency to your children, and shifting that.
And then another thing that I think of to support this is, have you ever listened to the epigeneticist Bruce Lipton? Oh man, he's amazing. So it's the biology of belief, and he talks about cells and frequencies and the biology of belief. So let's say somebody says, well, high cholesterol runs in my family. No, it doesn't. Lifestyle runs in your family.
Choices.
The choices, the food, the lack of exercise, all of that. So if we're going to look at ancestral lineage with maybe it's medical, maybe it's energy, maybe it's psyche, or maybe it's all of it, including talent. Most people who are these, you know, fabulous piano players have their great grandfather was this master piano player, or, you know, things like that. But many people don't know their lineage. So how do you tap into that?
So one of the things I like to do, and it's not easy for everyone, but what I do in my time to connect with my ancestors, I just take a moment to meditate, and then I call forth my ancestors. Usually I like to take a little bit of specific type of herbs and stuff like that to help the journey through, but sometimes they just come on through. And with me, ever since I was a kid, I used to hear my name being called by spirit. It would be different voices, different tones. And when I was younger, I did not understand it at first. It used to freak me out. I used to think that the house was haunted. And then I told my mom, I told my grandmother. My mom, she was more on the religious side. So she was saying that it was God talking to me and stuff like that. And my grandmother, which is a kitchen witch, she was more on the side of it's probably your ancestors, which led to that journey of the whole ancestry path to me. But either way, even if it was God talking or my ancestors, at a young age, I was just like, something is talking to me. They're trying to get my attention. And so the older that I became, and it was interesting because my father, he would always talk about his side of the family. He's half African-American, half Native American, Blackfoot Native American. And he would always talk about his history and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, wow, I really want to know into it, but I want to know my mom's side and stuff like that. So when I sit down and dive deep into it, I just ask them to come to me and they will show themselves in dreams and visions and even talk to me, tell me things that I need to know. Some like important things. Sometimes it'd be in languages I do not understand. Physically, I do not understand. But if you are having a hard time connecting to it and you don't want to go to like ancestry.com or do like a DNA test or something like that for whatever reason that may be, just call forth, ask and you shall receive. They will show themselves to you. Do not deny or do not be hesitant that, oh, this random person just showed up in my dream. That could be your great someone, and just listen and feel within your heart space if it's them or not, because ancestors too, it doesn't always have to be bloodline. It could be your past life's bloodline. It can be this life's bloodline, or it can just be someone that, was like an extended family, not by blood, So look into that and just, like I said, just be open to your heart space and feel what's right to you if you know that they are familiar, because we all have that familiar energy. When something is around us, we're like, oh, this feels safe, this feels secure. That's the same thing you're going to receive when you are working with your ancestors. So
I've got to tell you this story. So I've been blessed to know my great grandparents and grandparents. So my grandmother, may she rest in peace, my grandmother, my family were immigrants to this country. And my grandmother showed me this picture, and it was one of those, she's turn of the century photos that they used to take and probably took a week to develop. But she shows me this, she comes out, she said, Melissa, you have to look at this. And it's my grandmother and her family, all the family that came over from Poland. And they're in a buggy, okay, the days of horse and buggy. And she said, look in the buggy and tell me who you see. So I'm looking, and there's babies and kids and everything. And I'm looking through, and there's this one child, the exact identical spitting image of my daughter. My daughter, Essie, my youngest daughter. And I'm like, oh my God, Nana, is that not Essie in the buggy? She looked at me, she goes, is it not? Is it not identical? Like almost like somebody photoshopped her in there. And it gave me chills down my spine. And I've been looking, for that photo. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable because it was just a complete incarnation of my daughter. It just blew my mind.
I remember seeing a photo of my father and my grandfather when they were young, and it's the same thing. It was splitting image. It's like you look at me, let's say like 14, 15-year-old me, and it's just like I just survived like 2 other generations before me, So it's crazy how genetics can actually work, and both physically and in the way you can't see. Things can pass down, and that's one thing that we as people need to understand. We are taught that if you can see it in the physical, that's what it is. But yet there's so much going on inside of us that is what it is as well. But it's kind of like a little hesitant, because if science can't back it up, I mean, don't get me wrong, science is good. I love science myself. But spirit, our DNA, all that is what is. So when we come up to thinking whatever it is that our ancestors did, like, it doesn't affect us, and you'd be surprised. I mean, you look like your great-great-grandfather, you look like your great-great-grandmother, and you may carry some traits. You may have that talent you were talking about, that piano talent, that acting talent. You may have some something within your DNA that you may not know yet until you further on your relationship with your ancestors, or just as you grow in life. You never know. But just because you don't see it or you don't feel it doesn't mean it's not what it is. So,
well, what I think is really nice too, I just went through Karuna, and you have Karuna level 3, and it really hits home where science and spirit work together. It starts to all make sense at that point. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know for me, the understanding the masculine and the feminine energy. So the masculine is a lot of that definitions, the science, the quote unquote, I can't think of the words, just the definitions of all of that energy, a lot of the science. And then the feminine energy is that intuition, that energy that we feel when we experience it. And for me, I was so out of touch with the feminine energy that when I experienced energy in the pure form during the ignition process it hit home for me, because it made me see a lot of the way I projected things in my past, the way that I was perceiving it from my family, but not how I personally perceived it. And for me, it was religion. I had a lot of definitions towards religion based off of my family. And during the Karuna process of a lot of the Karuna Reiki symbols is a lot of healing on a DNA level, a lot of healing on a past life level. And when I was connecting to my present life and what I'm here to do, it was really connecting me into bridging that masculine feminine energy and sharing things with people on a I guess on a scientific level, but let's be honest, on a scientific metaphysical level, we're just scratching the surface. Quantum physics is just scratching the surface that our human brains can just barely comprehend. And when you mix in the feminine energy with quantum physics of actually experiencing the dimensional shifts, the astral plane in a way that can't even be defined, it's hard to even know how to comprehend words to express what you experience. And that's a whole reason behind the process of being attuned and ignited with frequencies of Reiki, is to get you into understanding that our human brain is so much more compatible to do things that we may not have a way to define.
Right. And I think the principle of coherence really comes into play, as above, so as below, where we know scientifically that energy cannot be destroyed.
Right.
And if we know scientifically that energy cannot be destroyed, well, where does it go?
Exactly.
Right? And they're coming up with ways to measure emotions. Are they in the biofield? Like, do they get stuck? Do they get reabsorbed? And where I find Reiki takes its place here is that it's certainly ancient and intuitive.
Very intuitive.
Those of you that are parents, anytime a child gets hurt, your first reaction is to take your hand, place it on the knee, the head, the stomach, or wherever, is because you're without even thinking, you want to do some palm healing. And then we go into ancient Egypt and the types of healing that was going on there, the
Egyptians
hands-on. This is being brought up again,
Mm-hmm.
it's not new.
The power of intention.
It's just not new.
No.
And that goes into example of what can be passed down from ancestral DNA. You know, someone that's born, they will have this feeling. It's like this natural muscle memory. And for instance, Reiki, since we're on that topic, someone just have like this strong feeling to just get into Reiki, and they're like, I don't know where this is coming from, but I feel called to this. And then once they be attuned, or once they're going through the process, it's just like, this feels natural. Comes to find out, their line, or just, it doesn't even have to be just their specific line. It's just where they come from and their environments from the past that did Reiki. It just shows that, hey, you know, this can be passed down to you. This is your right, you know. And the energy of Reiki, like we were talking about, is intuitive, you know. And once you just tap into that, it's smooth sailing from there.
It
you
flows.
just know. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I know for me, when I was level 1 and 2, being attuned, we were starting to practice and I was just intuitively flowing.
Mm-hmm.
My Reiki master looked at me and she's like, what are you doing? And I was just like, I'm just listening to my Reiki guides. And she's like, you're doing Reiki Master stuff. And I just looked at her and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess I was a Reiki master in a past life. And the more I stepped into the higher lineage, not higher lineages, but the higher levels within the lineages, the more I was really seeing the mixture of different lineages as well, like Usui and the Tibetan Reiki, which is very connected to Usui Reiki, and some of the newer modalities that really fits in our modern society of the Holy Fire and Karuna Reiki that were later developed in the mid-2000s that really connect that ancient wisdom along with our modern understanding of energy, and it just expands your consciousness in such a way that you can't even comprehend nor have words for it, because it's a lot of the ancient wisdom that's in your cellular structure, in your DNA, with this new understanding of the quantum physics of a lot of this science that is now starting to allow us energy healers to thrive that we haven't been able to in past decades.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's such a beautiful thing to like not only be a part of, but to witness on a mass level as well. The ancient, like what Ryant always says, is the future is ancient.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really coming down. It's really
Now,
happening.
earlier I had showed you a family tree.
Mm-hmm.
Do you read from that?
Yes and no. Like I said, I focus more on the healing part of it. And usually when someone comes to me with, for instance, like a family tree, or they have history about just their great greats, but they don't know nothing beyond that, I just asked them, I was just like, well, how was your upbringing? Where do you see in your life that you need something that needs to be healed? Because, you know, you see resemblance of your father, your mother, or your great greats, or, you know, stuff like that. So like I said, I just focus more on the healing part. I don't really read it and be like, oh, that's where it started, and, you know, stuff like that. That's usually, I lead the people to determine that for themselves. Mm-hmm. I guide people to do a specific ancestral meditation, take specific herbs to help out with that journey, and, you know, just help them pinpoint to get at least some sort of leadway of where to go with the ancestral path, ancestral healing. So
now you brought with you some beautiful things. Can we show and tell?
Yes. Okay. So first things first, I create Florida water. For those of you that don't know what Florida water is, it's pretty much a mix of herbs. For instance, like this, I use lime pill, lemon pill, mugwort, licorice root, all that to help out with divination tools, or just cleansing your specific area, cleansing yourself. If you're doing ceremonies, you can spray the room. For instance, like this one is Gaia's Divine's Harmony. So this one brings forth peace. And I have another one for guys that's called Gaia's Protection that works with more heavy energies. I usually use that one whenever I'm working with entity removal from a house or a person, because things can get strong. And though it is just a tool, it does help. But yeah.
Is it aromatherapy, or do you ingest it?
Or
both?
It's kind of both. It's safe to do both, but I would recommend it just to do aromatherapy, to just spray on your tools, spray on yourself, spray around the room. It's kind of like liquid sage in a way.
Nice.
But with the herbs and stuff that are in here, the herbs that specifically work with cleansing specifically. So if you can spray this, even though if you just want like a good smell around the room, this is an earthy smell, according to the people that have used this. So it brings that grounding sensation as well.
Very
and I kind of,
grounding.
yeah. And
Very
I like to work with what my energy is. So I'm a Taurus Aries, so I like things to be grounded and kind of like flaming and on the go. So if you are interested in getting some of this, I'm pretty sure my information would be at the end of this podcast, and I would be more than glad to, give more information and tell you what more of this is for. Now, I've just started doing this, and I am very crafty with my hands here. So I make crystal jewelry as well. So if you guys like to support small businesses and like crystal jewelry,
So let's talk about this. This is quite a piece. I felt these and they were like, whoa, these are heavy. And I have been attracted to that one over there. So I'm going to put that in my hand. This, every day is a different crystal for me.
I feel that.
They just kind of pick me.
Ruby.
Look at me. So this brass and copper?
Yes, brass and copper, and the stone is ruby infused. It's a hard name. It's
oh man, it's
Libra
nice.
Or something. So yeah, I just recently got it. The owner told us that it was fuchsite, but I did more research on it. I was like, that's not fuchsite. There was something else to it. It was a stone that I never really heard before.
And I love that these are also very masculine, and it's nice because
since I work more of like earthy elements,
guys, you should wear more crystals. Just saying.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Some crystals, some patchouli.
Patchouli orange to be that. Yeah.
So one of the things I was learning, I've been studying the Kybalion, and that's the Hermetic principles, and the energy. We talked before just now and said that energy never dies. Everything on this planet has some level of frequency. Even death has a frequency. It's very minute, but in the decay process, there's frequency, and everything that has a frequency has a sound. Well, it's not audible to us, but there is a sound. So amazing. The planets have a sound. The movement of the earth has a sound.
Saturn's ring.
Everything's music in this world, okay? And at first when people were working with crystals, like, oh, okay, she's working with crystals and tarot cards and crystal balls and da-da-da. And people didn't really see that as the energy that it is, that it exists. Like every single crystal has its own energy. And there's different days where you'll be called to pick up different crystals. I just really got into grids.
Oh, I love crystal grids.
Talk about it a little bit.
Well, it's all about intention. So there's the intention that you usually put in the center of the grid. And I guess it depends on the kind of grid that you're really going for. But for a very basic grid, the center crystal is your main energy center. And then the ones around it is going to be supporting that energy, amplifying that energy. And the beauty of it is there's no max of intentions that you can have within grids. And so for me, I use them a lot for my healings and also for spiritual marketing. I do all organic marketing on social media, and I use crystal grids to communicate with my guides to bring me the right audience and clientels, and I leave it up to them. I don't really care about the algorithm as much or any of the masculine definition of marketing as much, because I know my guides are bringing me what I need, and it's all based off crystal grids.
So you're connecting to your grid to just bring into your arena the things that
Yeah,
are
and
going to
I
support you. Is that
and
correct?
I write down an invocation with my guides of my intention and the frequency and the energy that I'm calling into that space, depending on what I'm marketing or what I'm sharing with my audience. And I just give it up to spirit, because I think spirit's a lot more powerful than any algorithm out there.
I like to grid my house. So what does that mean? That means that I'll put a stone in a central part in the house, and then I'll go to the corners of the house and set out different things, and even outside on the parameters.
A feng shui crystal grid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. I like that.
So I like that too. And then I rescued a puppy, and she started to find them.
Oh no.
She liked them too. So I was like, I don't blame you. I get it. I know why you like that, but like it's supposed to be there. But I just think these are beautiful. They're powerful. They're made with a heart. And when I see people craft things, and I know that while they're doing that, there's so much love going into that. And I think that translates when you buy something or something kind of speaks to you. What I wanted to ask you next is, what does a session look like with you? Like, what would be that flow?
Okay, so like I mentioned before, I'm also a Reiki Master. And once I became attuned, I was like, I want to do something more. So I created Sacred Earth Reiki. And at first, Spirit gave that word to me, and I was like, okay, so what does this mean exactly? And this was around the time too where I was stepping into my shamanic rite. According to my father, medicine man is running down through my family. So once I created that, and I was just like, so how can this be good for the people? How can this flow for the people? And I started studying, started doing, just working with spirit. And it told me, it was just like, okay, when you have someone in a session with you, cleanse them. Make sure that they are bringing out. So I don't force, but usually chances are when the energy is strong in the room, it just comes on out before the session even starts. They start crying, they start releasing. And I'm like, okay, that's the first start. And then I go ahead and balance out their chakras. Actually, I balance out their mind first, smooth it out. And then I go to the chakras and see where their chakras are. For instance, like if it's their heart space, if they just had their heart broken, or if they're having what my generation calls a cold heart, or if their root is out of balance, I make sure I balance that out with the chakras that are above them, and just smooth it on out like a conveyor belt, just a repeated conveyor belt. So that way they're receiving energy from source and from source below, because as above, so below. It's a constant cycle. And then once I get that done, I go into their energetic field. Because people think that when you're working with your chakras, that's your energetic field. No, you have like 3 to 4 energetic fields around us. So when you have the chakras that are that energetic field, you have your magnetic field. If that magnetic field is attracting things that are causing you harm or just not serving you, then it doesn't matter if your chakras are aligned, it's just going to be coming right back to you. So I like to just go through a level of smoothing out their chakras, smoothing out their energetic magnetic field. And then once we are done with that, I do a breathwork session. I am a huge advocate on breathwork. It is important to breathe properly. Because when we are born, you can see when the baby is born, they know how to breathe, but we are taught to breathe with our chest instead with our stomach. And that can cause a lot of damage. It may not seem like it, but it can cause a lot of damage. And then after the breath work's done, I do a little guided meditation to bring them to themselves. I like to have them visualize sitting in front of themselves, and if they like what they see. And if they don't, I like to guide them around into, saying positive, loving affirmations, speaking positive mantras to their self, and tell them to visualize all that negative stuff from that reflection forming into a more positive, more higher self frequency of self. And then after that, I let them sit for a little while or just lay there a little while. And I just continue to do Reiki on them and just smooth it on out. And then usually by the time they're done, it's like a whole heavy boulder just left from me that they didn't even know they had, And that's my main goal, is to help them heal within themselves. One of the things I like to say is what you think is what you speak, and what you speak becomes your reality. So whenever they leave a session with me, I like to have their mind change and be like, okay, so that negative thing that you were saying, reverse it, Say, for example, it was like, oh, I'm a disappointment. I'm like, no, you are cherished. You are loved. Tell that to yourself. And therefore, that's the energy you're going to receive through yourself. And so, but that's just the healing process of that. Usually after that, I get a lot of messages, and people will tell me, it's just like, for instance, like what we were talking about earlier, when there are like 5 to 6 hands just around them, and they will be scared. And I'm like, no, that's your people. That's your line. Those are your guides. Those are your ancestors. That's spirit surrounding you, telling you, showing you that you are okay. And they will have dreams, visions. They will start hearing things. This can get scary, but things will start moving around the house. For instance, like if you have plants, specific plants will start to move around, and plants have a high vibrational of ancestral line as well. So it's your ancestors, it's spirit telling you, like, we are here. Now it's time to work with us. And that's how a session goes.
It's really interesting. So people who are listening, I've heard the word Reiki Master a few times here, and something that I've come to understand is when you get to that level, you have not mastered the Reiki. The Reiki has mastered you. And I recently had a conversation with a family member who called me up and said, I've lost my faith. I've lost faith. And I answered, I said, so what? And they said, what do you mean, so what? I said, you can lose faith all you want, but faith will not lose you. Like nothing, you can go into your own funk, but the energy still remains. And it's okay. And that's a thing that I really have found, is that if I could have someone on the Reiki table, if they don't feel anything, that's okay. It doesn't mean it didn't happen.
It's all subconscious on that level.
Yeah, because a lot of times we're so guarded, we're so conditioned that we don't want to peel the onion. We don't want to be vulnerable to this person that we don't know that well. And we're laying there, and they're doing this thing, and they got their hands, and they got the pendulum, and they got the bowls, and they got the crystals, and all this stuff. And there's a self-consciousness that takes place for some people. And as the practitioners, since we're all practitioners, I have to say, we don't care, because it's going to happen to you anyway. Like, you could do all of that. You could be like this, but it's still happening. The Reiki's still happening. You can't stop it. You can't stop the energy. And I think each one of us can say humbly that all we are trying to be is a clear channel.
Yes. I'm
not causing the change. Yep. You're not causing the change. And as you described, you're just trying to help people get out of their own way.
Yep.
And the one thing about Reiki is no harm, no foul. It's not going to hurt. I promise it's not going to hurt. You may come to terms with some emotions that you decided to swallow. And when you were saying how you're dealing with the bodies and kind of clearing this and clearing that, what happens to me as an intuitive nutritionist, I'm picking up, I'll pick up gut issues. I'll come even a bacteria this person needs, or an amino acid, or a neurotransmitter, or something to help blood flow. These things just start coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm writing down is like, they need this, they need this, they need this. Or if I find that the solar plexus are stuck, I might go into, some color therapy as far as, eat yellow food for a while. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Wear yellow, eat yellow, put an amber light bulb in and start to surround yourself with this particular color. And all of this is science. Now, you're probably saying, fine, if it's science, then it needs to be measured because scientific things are measured. Well, things are being measured.
Yep, and things are being measured.
Things are being measured now, and not just behaviorally. There's imaging that are being done with biophotons, which are, how we say the light, the sparks. So there was a study, I wish I could paraphrase exactly which study it is, but anyway, there was a study, maybe I'll be able to get it in the notes, where they did almost like an electromicrography hookup, but it was to pick up light. And they were seeing what anger emanated and where. Well, of course it emanated from the liver. Chinese medicine's been telling that up to us forever. And then it was like sparking out. And the question in quantum, which is great, it's always a question. They'll say this is a theory, this is a hypothesis, but we're going to go with it, was where does it go? Is the body getting it sucked back in? Or is it going into the energetic body, which is usually about 6 feet out? We learn this from dogs. And then you need this kind of clearing. I look at it as like a spider web that may have some bugs stuck in it.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And then for you dog owners out there, have you ever seen, like, you have the best dog, greatest, sweetest dog, and then all of a sudden somebody comes into your space and your dog doesn't like this person. You don't know why, but your dog is picking up on an energetic field. Your dog is picking up on a sense. They don't know anything but their senses. Their senses are telling them something's wrong, and then puts them into that role of, I need to protect my pack. And so I pay attention to that,
And that goes to what I was saying earlier too. It's just, we have been so trained to pay attention to the physical, but everything, our energy, what we can feel, our 6 senses, probably our 100 senses, who knows how many true senses that we honestly have, but we are told to not pay attention to those because we can't see it, but we can feel it. We know it's there. So I like that.
And Erin, you had talked just in quickly, I know that you're a high-level Karuna Reiki Master, and you also do some mediumship. Is that correct?
Yes, I am starting to get into that more and more recently. I've had 3 deaths in the last 8 months where I've had a lot of communications with them, and I was first introduced to my mediumship in high school and then mainly in college. And I don't see them, but I hear them. I'm very clairaudient, and this is where I have mixed a lot of my Reiki in with, like when I'm really focusing on healing the DNA, I will hear their, not just their ancestors, but some of the family members that are connected to that trauma, and I'll hear them helping me guide that energy to be released because they're part of that healing still. Even though they're not on this dimension, they're not in the 3rd dimension, they're still part of that connection to the family wound, to the family energy that's still connected. And I have experienced that a handful of times where I'm now experiencing it on my own level, in my own family, where I'm like, wow. And it goes very deep. And it's definitely a realm, it's more like charades, but it's actually kind of fun because my favorite game as a kid was charades, which is so funny because the way I hear them is like charades, where it's like instead of hearing a whole sentence, you hear one or two words, and at the very end of the session, it all comes together with other modalities, with Reiki, with some of the channeling of energy, and then it clicks. And when I do a session, at the very end of the session, I go into giving a tool to the person to be able to take the frequency during the session and continue that frequency on within their own space in their own healing modalities. And a lot of times it comes up with the medium of what their ancestors are trying to connect to them, especially when it's a lot of ancestors that they remember with grandparents and parents is probably some of the heaviest ones, where they want to connect with their loved ones, but they have a block thinking that they can't. And we all do. We all have mediumship skills, right? It's just whether you are tuned into the right frequency and right wavelength to be able to hear it in the way that you hear it. Because there's 8 different clairs. We all have different ways of communicating with these spirits and with the universe. And so that's a lot of the times when I give a tool at the very end of a session, it's usually a medium one to connect more with that energy being released within their cellular structure.
Well, I think that we're so blessed here in Colorado Springs to have practitioners like yourselves. And I know you both are also able to work online. So, Erin, how do people get a hold of you?
So my handle is Bountiful Connections.
Okay.
On all platforms.
On all Bountiful Connections.
Bountiful Connections.
And we'll have all of your information also in the notes. And Ryant?
So you can contact me on Instagram at shaman_liwanu, and then RTP Enlightenment everywhere else.
Very good. And I want to thank you both for being here. I'm so excited to make new friends.
Likewise.
And today, this podcast is coming from the Center for Essential Wellness. I couldn't be more proud to represent this building, this community. I'm so excited about all the things that we are doing. And that's essentialwellnesssociety.com, as well as Center for essentialwellness.com. This portion was sponsored by Healing Wheel Holistic and Healing Wheel Retreats, healingwheelholistic.com. I am Melissa Stonehill Caiyem, and I want to thank you for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
much.